talking about the history between India and Pakistan. I'm Amanda Armagost.
And I'm Dr. Bossi for Essence. What a what a heavy history. Um, I think we cannot talk about the current history of India and Pakistan without talking about um, their previous history over the last few thousand years. So that's one of those things that maybe not millions of years, but I do have to go a few thousand years back.
Yeah, India is one of like the oldest civilizations actually, the India
Yeah,
Pakistan
and
area.
what we call India, Pakistan, it's mostly all of that was one area, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka, and so on. These are diverse group of people, different language, even the alphabet is different, but
Mhm.
all what they have in common is that they their traditions are extremely close, and what we call India today is actually practically Indus River, people who lived around Indus River and um,
The Indus Valley.
Indus Valley and Indus River, and it expands from Himalayas, where China is, all the way west to Iranian plateau, and obviously north up to Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been always different because the mountain again separate that. Practically, from Iranian plateau to the mountain of in mountainous region in northern Pakistan to the Himalayas. This is what separated this area from the rest of the civilization. And India has been on and off. Just people have marched there and just taken what they can take. Even Iran, like the most important, jewels of Iranian monarchies, it's what they literally borrowed from India.
Same with like the British.
So, well, British borrowed as well a lots of Indian. There's a joke. Why is Taj Mahal in India, in New Delhi?
I know the joke.
What's the answer?
It's too big. It's too big for the British to take.
Yeah, it was too big for them to transport it to London Museum. So, but what I think is very important here is that, and you and I we have been in India multiple times. It is very fertile ground. What that means is that you can do agriculture, and agriculture and the fertile ground it produce a situation that you can have a lot of inhabitants. So it has been always populated well. And with population and with the people being close to each other, civilization starts. So India, without question, or that area, I don't want to insult anybody who was just saying India. I mean, India, Pakistan,
You can say the
Bangladesh.
Indus Valley region.
Yeah. Or Indian, I would call it almost that like a half continent for itself.
I've always been so confused why India is not its own continent, or like Southeast Asia in general is just so big. How I'm always
Asia is generally
Asia's
big.
huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
Asia's huge and diverse in
Yeah.
itself, but I'm always surprised that India is not a
Now,
continent.
what is important in Asia is that certain geographic things are separating it. Okay, like there is no really border, at least not a clear border between Europe and Asia. Some people say the Ural Mountains or Ural River is a border between that, and that makes today's Russia mostly in Asia than in Europe. And then obviously it comes down to the
Caucasus.
Caucasus region, where the mountains in again. Um, these are mostly barrier that was hard for people to traverse, to
Mhm.
go through. And obviously Himalayas, that is a real barrier, and that's what literally separated China from India, East Asia from rest of the Asia. In north of China, those huge steppes that practically they're deserts, like there are no water, there's no infrastructure. That was a natural barrier, and then that sort of separated China from Mongolia and Siberia. And obviously, what separated India from Iran wasn't a geographic thing, but it was a political thing. It was a very strong central government in Iran that always was expanding, whereas in India, they were just this city state like Greek. There are smaller governments that each region has its own, government, tradition, language, alphabet,
Hmm.
and so on. And India is ginormous from the population standpoint. Is not the most populous country in the world, and this wasn't just happened. India, before it was colonized, was 14 to 18% of the world GDP. Just India
Wow.
alone.
Wow.
Do you know what happened after British were done with India?
Oh, well, they had probably not much
It was
left.
about
And
3%
yeah,
because all the
a lot
wealth
of
was,
instability, I'm guessing, too, just between like rulers and people and things like
yeah.
that.
Now, colonization of India was the most severe or efficient, if you want to call it, wealth transfer in the history of humankind.
What do
That's
you
why they
mean?
called it, well, they took everything that really was producing wealth, transferred it to England. So England became truly a world power by literally getting all the wealth of India out of India. And and the way they did that is actually very almost painful to
Evil,
read.
almost, when I.
Yeah, painful to read in the history. um, they had so-called in 1700 the so-called Indian uh, Company. They called it East Indian Company because the West, what they called the Americas Indian, they weren't Indian, but they wanted to create something similar to West Indian Company, but we American, we sort of intervened and say we had the so-called Monroe Doctrine that said, you know what, you can colonize things in Africa and Asia, but Americas is our domain. We are going to colonize America. You cannot come to.
We're gonna do it. Yeah.
We're gonna do it. It's our domain. Those so-called Monroe, President Monroe, eventually in 1800. So we sort of coming back to that. The colonization of India was stepwise. Now, what they started to, now these companies, they would go there, make deal with a small kingdom or with small princedom or something like a local government or
Remember, we went to the castle in Bangalore,
yeah,
and it didn't really have a lot of Indian history. Do you remember that?
yeah, because all the Indian history was
Taken.
probably in some of European museums. Yeah, we had this. It was I was actually disappointed that it was very,
It actually, I felt like, had a lot of British history in it.
yes, yes,
Yeah, I felt disappointed too when
yeah,
we were walking through the castle. I remember feeling like sad, feeling bad for all of the people because the castle itself was beautiful and it was really
yeah,
well designed, but there was no history in the
yeah.
in the
Not
castle.
as much as you would expect
It was
from a
not.
country that has thousands years of history.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't like a museum.
no. Well, actually, that was the place where the government, which is appointed by British, used to operate and live. Now, so East Indian Company goes to this, make literally arrangement with local government, and for British, that was always the MO. They would go and stir up uh, dissatisfaction, wars, division to rule entire area. That is what they would do. That is exactly what they would do at every point.
Like East and West Pakistan,
Well, that it came much later.
but it was
Okay.
still done by them.
Mm, that was, I mean, that we get to that. That is actually a little different. But so they go there, they have this literally alliances with local governments, and they incite them against each other. And they literally start war against each other. They grind each other. And then obviously, British always come on top because once they are weak, they go and impose their will on local government and then little by little expand. But then they are so horrible. This East Indian company is so horrible, so deploring that the British says that's unhuman. What your British government, British Parliament says that's unhuman. What you're doing. Now we are going to step in, and it's all ours. Because until then, East Indian Company acted like a government. In the government, they have their own army, they have their own navy, they impose their will. You cannot imagine how rich, how insanely rich those people got by literally
Depleting India.
raping all the wealth of India and so on. So, and this goes on and on and on. And then eventually, a lawyer who was trained in India and England and then went to South Africa says, ask for certain rights for Indian people. You know who that is. We went in his museum, Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. Um, Practically, I think what was different, I mean, it was timed. People were upset. People were totally ready for a violent revolution. But I think what Gandhi did is that brought a peaceful, uh, I would say, um, peaceful method in transitioning the power. As a matter of fact, when British Empire was all the way down after when the World War started, it would be easy to just get rid of them. But Mahatma Gandhi said, we cannot backstab British when they are down, even though with all the bad things they have done to India. So he sort of delayed this independency with the promise that they will be independent after the war. Now, what you need to know again, what make India India, I mean, some people will probably do a hate comment on what I'm going to say. India was not one country. By the time the British went there, it was governed by hundreds. The biggest power, they were the Mughals, the Muslims, and so on, mostly in northern. And that's important when we get to India, Pakistan. And that Taj Mahal, it was built by Mughals, the Muslims, and so on. And lots of administrative things. The biggest power in that area were the Mughals, which were Muslim. So it wasn't the unified country. What actually unified them is that that British colonized it all. That is actually unified India as we know today, because they like we were there. You see that alphabet is different. People don't speak the same language, and they speak mostly English when they go from one area to another area. Actually, they speak English, and so administratively, when they went under the as a total colony of the British, practically their struggle against British unified them, but not enough. In 1947, when this movement, the independent movement, said, "Okay, we wait until the war is over." In 1947, when the war was over, and said, "It's our time." And the vision there was continue like the colonial time, all that different group of people under a federal system. But I don't know how much really, British were involved in that. I think at that point, British were too weak to start new problems and so. But either way, the differences were too big for this big majority Hindu group and the Muslim group to agree to the same terms. And that is probably one of the biggest missed opportunity for both countries, India and Pakistan, that they couldn't overcome their differences. As a matter of fact, I think that is Mahatma Gandhi went to a hunger strike for, I think, almost 40 days or something, almost died. But and that is actually where there would have been a civil war. That's actually what prevented the civil war and made somewhat peaceful that transition to two countries. Obviously, we know those countries today as not two countries. We know them as three countries: Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and if people are familiar with that, India is the middle, uh, Bangladesh is to the east, Pakistan is to the west. But these were just where the Mughals have the most of their influence, where majority Muslim people used to live,
Mhm.
and they had so-called East Pakistan, which is today Bangladesh and Pakistan, and then India, and then there were some areas of contentious because the population and so on, and that's obviously Kashmir.
Mhm.
That each country says, and now even now there's the Pakistani Kashmir and the Indian Kashmir. What people really don't understand that there are more Muslim in India than there are in Pakistan. So India is now 1.4 million. Bangladesh and Pakistan, they're almost half a million, half a
I
billion people.
I remember one of the cities we were in India, Ahmedabad, I think, had a
Mhm.
prayer call.
Yeah, yeah, they had a prayer call there.
That's a Muslim city. It's a dry city.
Yeah, and that is north. That's northern. Were under the Mughals. They were under Mughals, control and so on. But I think what we can see from India is more or less this diversity can coexist,
Mhm.
and I think that means that at least what I believe that it was a power structure struggle between the politician that really incited this sentiment, and then there were civil wars. There were lots of people killed,
Yeah.
and on both sides there were huge movement of people, Muslim from India to Pakistan and vice versa, Hindus from today's Pakistan and so on and so forth. So that was really one of the areas that we as humanity we really failed, and now the consequences of that is that um, the most radical in any kind of tension um, it feeds to the most radical groups of both sides.
Of course.
So what we need to know as well is that um, the Bangladesh was part of Pakistan,
Hmm.
and 1970s actually it was the situation was on not sustainable anymore because in the West Pakistan, today's Pakistan, they were completely putting down the East Pakistan. They taking the resources, they wouldn't advance them to government position and so on. So Bangladesh they declared independency because of this poor treatment.
Which is crazy because you think like all of this history is really old, but 1971, that wasn't that long ago
Yeah,
that Bangladesh got their independence.
and they went and massacred people. Guess who helped them to massacre their own people?
Who,
United States.
really?
Yeah,
Not surprising.
yeah, yeah. As their thing from Nixon, they were afraid that Soviet Union get more power because all the things that happened, India was more aligned with Soviet Union. Not they weren't communist or anything, but they were more aligned there, and Pakistan was more aligned with United States. And when the dictator, the General Khan and so on, they went start killing people, we helped them. We suppressed the news about that and so on. Obviously, they didn't succeed in suppressing Bangladesh independent movement, but yeah, we wholeheartedly were on the wrong side again.
Big shocker.
Yeah, big shocker.
Yeah, I always thought it was really interesting my first time in India when we pulled up to the hotel.
Hmm.
And when you pull up to a hotel, and I was just telling Cassandra this, when you pull up to a hotel in India, the security is there and they make you pop your trunk and the police like search your car a little bit to make sure that there's no one hiding in there.
Yeah,
And then after that, you have to put your bags in any
like a
hotel, doesn't
security.
matter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like airport
any
security.
high-end hotel, I would say,
You have
because
to put your bags through the metal detector and you have to walk through a metal detector. And it's because actually in Mumbai where we're staying, Dr. Mayor told me it was where we're staying
that is
at,
there where that massacre was.
yeah, at the Taj Mahal hotel. The Pakistani military, who what are they called?
Terrorists, they're Pakistani.
No, they have a name though.
Well, they called it themselves separatists or something, but they few years back they went there and literally start killing everybody that they
Purposely
could find.
tourists though.
Yeah.
They were targeting tourists because they wanted it to be a big national news thing.
Yeah, they actually, lots of people died there, and more or less, um, this this division um, fed to the narrative of the most radical on both sides. And no, let make no mistake, there are Hindu movement that they go to a village of Muslim and kill everybody. Has been a lot of that and so on. So this goes both
Oh,
ways.
for sure.
Okay, it's not a one-way street, and I'm unfortunately the most recent government in India um, has been more nationalistic in that sense that um, uh, that they uh, that has made the reconciliation even a little harder, not better. Now, having said that, these are two very populous countries. Obviously, India has more money and
Well, it's bigger too.
bigger and so on. And
More resources.
but on the other side, on the Pakistan side, they're just afraid as well to be pushed down and to be against a bigger army. So what do? India started developing a nuclear program in 70s even, and in Pakistan felt that the only way to overcome that, they have their own nuclear program. Now we are talking about two nuclear uh, armed countries having now same problem. Kashmir used to be known for its wool.
Yeah, cashmere sweater.
Yeah. And it's because of the, kind of, the sheep and so on and so forth has been, and now Kashmir is known for where people still fight and the Third World War may start.
But but why? I know it sounds dumb when I say, but what's the main goal? Why are they fighting?
Each country says that the region, Kashmir, belongs to us. And none of them really agree on a solution that is acceptable to both. You see, most of the time, an agreement that is acceptable to both includes concessions
Yeah, people say compromising is when both sides lose.
or wins, however you take it. And but the root of the story there, the root of the problem there is um, that this colonialism and how it imposed rules that everybody had to follow. But then when they went away, they weren't mature enough to create their own. Like you look at the borders in like Europe, they are all wiggly and so on and so forth. Look at the borders in US between the states are like a ruler. These are artificial borders. So are borders in Middle East. Like in Middle East, like one of the things I can come to my mind, and this is not a speculation. Actually, Winston Churchill, who I know lots of people admire, but I think one of the most inhuman, villain of this history, said, "Divide and conquer," meaning that go there, start shit, create chaos, and we did that as well. We have done in US, we have done a lots of time as well, created chaos that we are the most stable force. Then everybody want to be our partner because everything else is chaos. But that's the chaos we produce, we cause. British did the same there. Okay, they created a lots of chaos that they were the most stable. Then I rather be with British than with this princedom or with that kingdom and then this and that and so on. But that was a method in that madness to creating that chaos. And that part of that chaos is that um, everybody thinks they are going to lose if they make concession. And that is what's happening in Kashmir. Like there are this separatist movements. Some people say they are under the pay of the Pakistani security system and so on. That once in a while they go across the border and start just shooting people. And then a nationalistic government in India cannot appease his own population by just sitting around. They have to respond. So that war that we are seeing right now is mostly, I mean, okay, well, India is 1.4 million, Pakistan is almost 200 million, and so on. Few hundred people died probably. So it's not a big number considering, but each side is practically making a PR campaign for their own
Mm-hmm.
and for their own population by um, doing this border war. the the fear is there that it gets out of hand, and this is nothing new, that in Kashmir they shoot at each other and they bomb each other, they kill here, they kill there, and so on. This is by itself not new, but the fear is now that this is going to get out of hand, and somebody, just get totally crazy and drop a bomb, and then we are dealing with the truly with the third world war, not with the just a local focal conflict anymore. And but knowing, having friend on both sides, I'm truly optimistic that the reason and the humanity prevails, because um, that one of our good friend Dr. Bashir, who is from Pakistan, was saying that is he doesn't understand these people are, if you check their DNA, there's no more closer people
Well,
than
because
these two group of people.
it's not about civilians, it's about government. It always is about government and about government control, pinning civilians against each other because they know that that's like if you get someone's emotions, that's how you get to them.
That is exactly, the rising their emotion high and then literally trying to solidify their power by, again, chaos. If in chaos people look up to strong looking leaders, and that solidified their power. Now, having said that, yeah, having met those people, I think in the age that people see one of the things about, I love about social media is that bring them people from entire world closer together.
Mhm.
Certainly, it can as well cause a lots of hate and so on. But now,
But that's kind of like up to the individual. If you're a hater on social media, you're a hater kind of in general.
but more than, see, um, one of the reasons, like Germany and France have been enemies for centuries, like centuries. They can never go to war with each other. Do you know why? Everybody has a friend in other
Well, you
country.
just drive from Germany to France.
Yeah,
It's
everybody goes and buys shopping in the other country and so on. They are now, their culture is not so much intertwined. You cannot make them enemy again. No, but that has to start somewhere. So yes, there are still people in France who hate Germans because of what they did in World War II, but they're dying out. And there are still people in Germany who hate France and their thing. But even the most radical, like a right wing radical in Germany, they're aligned with the radicals in France and vice versa. So um, when you start communicating, it's hard to hate. When you start knowing people from the other cultures, it's hard to hate them. Like for a long time, Iranian and Arabs, they were like, oh, the Arabs are bad, Iranians are bad, they hate us, and so on. But now we travel there, we eat their food, we go to their homes, and vice versa. You cannot be enemy anymore. I'm wondering, how can that process start for India and Pakistan? Maybe that start with both of them come to US and Pakistanis and Indians become friends here in US.
yeah.
Or they watch each other TikToks, they see they dance the same way. They
Right.
like the same,
The
they
music
have the same.
has the same tempo.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to solve their the long-standing, war issues in Kashmir. But once you get to know other people, it's harder to hate them.
Totally.
And I think that is hopefully that's something that social media can start that process for us.
Thank you guys for watching. This was Essence of History, and we talked about India and Pakistan. I'm Amanda Armagast.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence.
Thanks for watching.